Sir, Thangarajan sir.
சொல்லுங்க மேடம்.
ஓகே சார், ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ணிக்கலாம் சார். ஒரு ஓகே சார்.
சொல்லுங்க.
ஓகே சார், ஓகே சார். நான் so very good morning to one and all. On behalf of Vellalar College of Engineering and Technology, I feel honored to welcome you all for the fourth day of AICT Atal sponsored FDP on the topic Artificial Intelligence. Today's resource person is Dr. R. Thangarajan. He is here to give a talk on artificial neural networking. I feel happy to introduce our resource person to you all. Dr. Thangarajan is currently working as a professor in the Department of Kongu Engineering College and in IT department. His research area includes theoretical computer science, natural language processing, and machine learning. He is having 24 years of experience in the field of teaching and research. He has published papers in 30 international journals and presented 13 papers in international conferences. He has been invited as a resource person for workshops, seminars, and faculty development programs in various engineering colleges and universities around India. Dr. Thangarajan is an editor and reviewer for many international books and journals. For his excellence, he was funded many government agencies for innovative research projects. He has guided many projects in UG, PG, and PhD levels. Now, I want to hand over the session to Dr. Thangarajan, sir.
Sir? Thank you. Good morning. Please allow me to present actually my.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay, right. Okay. Thank you so much. So, at the outset, let me thank the Vellalar College of Engineering and Technology for having given me this opportunity to interact with the faculty through this Atal FDP program on artificial intelligence. Okay. So I thank Vellalar College of Engineering and Technology, and a very good morning to all the participants. As I was introduced, so my today's agenda will be to talk about artificial neural networks, and in specific, I'm going to take up recurrent neural networks. Okay, so this is going to be the agenda for my today's talk. Okay. So if you have any difficulties, Miss, the technical team, they can interrupt. I hope all of you can hear me very well.
Yes, sir. No problem.
Okay. Now just I will share my screen. Okay, so just I would like to, as per today's agenda, so I would like to talk about neural networks. Okay, right from the beginning. Okay, right from the beginning till recurrent networks, till recurrent neural networks. So today we call it deep learning. Okay, today we call it deep learning, but actually it is a neural network. Okay, so artificial neural network, what we call today deep learning. Okay, so I will just tell you how this transition happened from artificial neural network to deep learning. Okay, so now today I will just begin my session with this agenda. Okay. So I may switch off my camera. So I'll begin with the agenda today. So it is about the history, okay? The history of neural networks, okay? So how it came into being. So I will start from the initial days, okay? Say like from 1871, okay? So at that time, so all of you may be aware that artificial neural networks is actually about what you call imitating how the brain and human nervous system, the brain, especially the brain works. Okay, so in that connection, the artificial neural network is motivated by neurosciences. Okay, so neuroscience is the background from which the artificial neural network has been motivated. So when you talk about neuroscience, we'll get into the history of neuroscience. So initial days, in those days, 1871 to 1873, so it was thought that the complete brain, the human brain, is actually a continuous network of mass. Actually, it was taken as a solid, what do you call, a continuum of mass. Okay, so not made of cells. Today we know that any organ is made of smaller units called cells, but in those days they thought the brain was made of a continuous continuum of tissues. Okay, and it was called the reticular theory. Okay, and it was proposed by Joseph V. Gerlach. The nervous system is hypothesized as a single continuous network as opposed to a network of many cells. Okay, so what they thought was there are cells, but actually they are not independent. They are continuous. They are continuous all over the brain. That was the thing. Then there was some improvement in the staining techniques. Okay, tissue staining techniques. So at that time, what happens? Camillo Golgi discovered a chemical reaction that allowed him to examine nervous tissue in much greater detail than ever before. Because of that staining technique, it was now possible for them to look into the nervous tissue more detail under a microscope. Okay, and he was actually the proponent. He was the particular person who supported the reticular theory. The reticular theory meaning that human brain is a continuous tissue, okay, or a continuous mass of tissue. Right. This was the days 1871, 1873. Then the neuron doctrine that came, okay, Santiago Ramon Cajal made use of Golgi's technique to study the nervous system. He used the same staining technique. Golgi introduced the staining technique of the brain tissue. So Ramon Y. Cajal, he also used the same technique. Was that nervous system discrete individual cells as opposed to a single continuum of tissue. He said that the brain tissue is made up of individual cells, and each individual cells, they form a network. Okay, these cells join together in a number of complex ways, and they create a network. Okay, so this was as opposed to the single continuous network of the previous slide. What is a reticular theory? So that is a reticular theory says it is a single continuous network, but whereas the neuron doctrine says it is the individual cells that are forming a network. So this theory was proposed by Ramon Y. Cajal. Then the word neuron came. The neuron. The term neuron was coined by Heinrich Wilhelm Gottfried around in 1891. At that time only they have coined this word neuron. Otherwise, the nervous system cell, a single cell of the nervous system is called a neuron. Okay, so this name was coined by Mr. Heinrich Wilhelm Gottfried. The neuron, Heinrich Wilhelm, it is the neuron doctrine that is true. That meaning that the brain is made up of individual cells. Okay, the human nervous system is made up of individual cells, and these cells, they form a complex network. That's what was proposed in the neuron doctrine. Then both Golgi, who was a proponent of reticular theory, and Cajal, who was a proponent of neuron doctrine, were jointly awarded the 1906 Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine. So in this 1906, the Nobel Prize for Medicine or Physiology was given to both Golgi and Cajal. Their theory, what do you call, contradicting. Okay, Golgi said the human brain is made up of continuous mass. of tissue, whereas Kejal said it is made up of individual cells, and these cells, they form a neuron, network. That's what Kejal said. And but anyway, both the works were they were breakthrough as far as the nervous system was concerned in those days. So in 1906, the Nobel Prize was given to both of them. Okay. And finally, you see that Nobel Prize was given in 1906 for both reticular theory as well as neuron doctrine. But you see that in 1950, people started using the electron microscopy. Okay, till then there was no electron microscopy. But after the advent of electron microscopy, then people started analyzing the cells very closely. They were able to take at a very high resolution the images of the cells, and it was finally confirmed that the neuron doctrine is right. They finally concluded that the neuron doctrine, because what do you mean by neuron doctrine? That your brain is made up of individuals to form network. And you see that how they able to see means they saw that there is a connection between two neurons. Say this is one neuron here on the top, there is another neuron at the bottom, and you see there's a gap between the two neurons. So this is a junction between two neurons. That's, I will say, the dendrite of one neuron joins the neuron soma. Soma means the body of the another cell. So there it doesn't join. Actually, there is a gap. You see a gap, and between the gap there is an exchange of chemicals. There's an exchange of chemicals, and that exchange of chemicals is called the neurotransmitters. Okay, the neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters are transmitted between the junction, so that the two neuron cells, they communicate with each other. Okay, and this junction is called a synapse. This junction is called a synapse, and the synapse leads to interconnection between many neuron cells. Okay. So that finally it was decided only by the electron microscope that the brain consists of individual neurons or individual cells that are connected to other neurons in a complex manner, and the connection between the neurons is called a synapse. Okay, so this was done in 1950. You see, there's a long period. Okay, 1906 to 1950. But anyway, in 1906, even the reticular theory was given the Nobel Prize. Okay. Now come to the artificial intelligence fame. You may know that the term AI is a very old term. Okay, it's not a new term. It's a very old term. Similarly, neural networks is also a very old term. Okay. But actually, you know that there has been a lot of interest in neural networks recently. But in the middle, maybe I think in the 1980s or maybe in 1990s and all, at that time there was no much interest among people who are working on this neural networks. Okay, so it is called the ups and downs in AI fame. Okay, AI undulations, ups and downs in AI fame. Okay, so we start with the first McCulloch-Pitts neuron. Okay, so this is how till before this, up to this point, we are talking about the biological neuron, but now we are talking about the neuron of the there has been model. Okay, it's called artificial neuron. Okay, now we are going to talk about the artificial neuron. So you see that this what I show here is an artificial neuron. So here you see it was proposed by McCulloch, who happened to be a neuroscientist, and Pitts happened to be a logician, who simplified the neuron in 1943 and gave this. Okay, so you have some inputs x1, x2 up to xn. These inputs are binary. You see they are binary. Okay, binary inputs, and these inputs are taken, and there is a function that aggregates them. And based on this aggregation, this f is again a binary output. So output is also binary. So I'll just demonstrate this. Okay, as we go along. Okay. means there will be some threshold. Okay, what is that? What is actually going to happen is we will have an aggregation here, this aggregation, and there will be a threshold. If this aggregation happens to be greater than the threshold, then f will be 1. Otherwise, f will be 0. Okay, that is what actually the thing is. So it is, the output is binary, and this happened to be in 1943. Then came the perceptron, proposed by Frank Rosenblatt. Okay, it was pronounced that the perceptron may eventually be able to learn, make decision, and translate languages. You see, long back. So the perceptron came only in 1958, 1957, 58. Okay, so at that time itself, they started saying that the perceptron will eventually be able to learn, make decisions, and translate languages, like what we are doing today. That's what we are doing today. Okay, and so you use neural networks for all sorts of decision making. We use neural networks for all sorts of translation, machine translations, etc., etc. So we are so what is happening in 2009, 2020? Okay, has been much predicted, much before. That is in 1957 itself. Okay, and it was the perceptron. So what is a perceptron? Perceptron is again the same, something like similar, but here we have a weighted inputs instead of having just inputs like the Bacalauc pit is inputs, but here input is weight. One is weight W1, X2 is W2. So that means you have to weight each input. Say, for example, you have to say X1 W1, multiply the weight with the rect, then plus X2 W2. Okay, like that it goes on up to Xn Wn. Okay, and then this totally, this is summation, this is summed. So this is actually summing, or I can say I is equal to 1 to n Xi Wi, where Xi is individual features of the input. Okay, I can say Xi is nothing but X1, X2, like this up to Xn. Okay, so this is individual inputs. Okay, and vector of inputs, where each input is called a attribute. Okay, each Xi is called an attribute or a dimension of the input. So it's called, I call it an n dimension vector. So this is my input, and similarly I have a n dimension weight. Okay, so I have an n dimension weight is there. So what I will do is I will multiply them. Okay, right. And again there is a after summing them up, there is again another function. Okay, that tells you there's a threshold, and that threshold, if this summation happens to be greater than the threshold, then y is equal to some function. Okay, some function of this summation. So here y will be some function of this. So because of this reason, y can take any value. It can take any real value. So it need not be 0 or 1. It can take any real value. Okay. So that's why in that manner the perceptron differs. Similarly, x1, x2, xn can have any values. They need not be restricted to binary values. Okay. Right. And another thing is that we are able to learn. We are able to learn these values w1, w2 up to wn. These are weights which we can learn. Okay. And because of that, we can change the value of this summation. And also, I was talking about the threshold. Okay, the threshold T, which was fixed in case of our previous Bacalauc pits. But whereas in case of perceptron, this threshold also can be learned. Threshold can also be learned. That I will tell you later. So because of this, now you see that the perceptron is able to learn. You see that something that is a remarkable feature as far as AI is concerned, because AI systems should be able to learn. Okay, so a perceptron is able to learn, but whereas Bacalauc pits cannot learn. There's no learning in a Bacalauc pits algorithm, but whereas a perceptron can learn, and this perceptron was proposed way back in 1957 to 58. Then came multi-layer perceptron. Okay, now instead of using a single perceptron, now it was proposed by Ivak Ko during 1965-68. He proposed that you can have multiple layers layers of perceptron that are interconnected between layers, okay, like this, okay, and there is going to be one output layer. So now you have an input layer, this is input layer, and this is output layer, okay, output, input, and in the middle you can have multiple hidden layers. Okay, like so this is was a thing. And what is the advantage of a single perceptron to a multi-layer perceptron is about the non-linearity that you can bring in, the amount of non-linearity that you can bring in your system. Okay, so that is that. But perceptron also had their own limitation. Okay, perceptron also had their own limitation, and it was proposed in the Minsky-Papert. Okay, in the famous book Perceptron, they showed that the perceptron also has some limitations. Okay, so because of this, what happened was there came winter. Winter means I will say it was the people lost interest in perceptron and further research in AI. So that what you call AI connectionism means neural network is a kind of AI that is connectionist model. So here the components are connected as a network. Okay, there are other forms of AI, like for example AI expert systems, AI logic. Okay, so there are other forms of AI system, but AI connectionism is a but this there was a brief loss of interest in people in this particular area of research. Okay, and it was the 1969 is said to be the winter, and from 1969 you see 1986 there was no much research in AI. Okay. Then came the back propagation and gradient descent algorithms. Okay, so it was again you see that that was the limitation. That was the limitation of the learning algorithm was the limitation. The perceptron had a learning algorithm. We'll come to that. Okay, the learning algorithm had this limitation, but with the advent of gradient descent approach, okay, and the back propagation, which was discovered in 1960 to 70 by different people. Actually, it was discovered by physicists. When they were studying the orbit of heavenly bodies. It was discussed in other contexts also, but it was first this gradient descent and back propagation was first proposed by Rumelhart. In 1986, it was proposed. So where they said how you can actually learn this multi-layer perceptron. Okay, so that's what's called the propagation, back propagation algorithm is that. So there will be a forward propagation, so in which you will be doing some calculating the activation functions and all. Then there will be a backward propagation where the errors will be propagated back and the learning will happen at every layer. Okay, so this forward propagation and backward propagation, these two phases together make up the back propagation algorithm. But basically it's a gradient descent approach. Okay, so gradient descent means your learning algorithm will always proceed in the direction of the steepest gradient. Okay, gradient is slope. Gradient is the slope. So your algorithm will always proceed in the direction opposite to the steepest slope. Okay, so that is what actually the gradient descent algorithm is. And because of this invention of the gradient descent algorithm in 1970s to 1986 somewhere, so then there was again a revival of interest in neural networks. Okay, so for a long time there was no interest in neural networks. But after 1986, when this back propagation algorithm was proposed, people started again having a renewed interest in neural networks. Okay. So now I'll come with an approximation theorem, a theorem that states the universal approximation theorem. So what is this universal approximation theorem says? So it says a multi-layered neuron network, a multi-layered network of neurons, or a multi-layered network of perceptrons, or whatever you can say, with a single can be used to approximate any continuous function to any desired precision. Okay. So whatever function you have, you may have any sort of function. Okay. So you can approximate any continuous function with a neural network. Okay. So what does that mean? That I'll explain here. So so it means that, say you have just a minute. Yeah. So what does it mean? So it means that I'll open a new one. So what does it mean? It means that, say for example, you have, say you have a then this is the input layer. This is input. So input layers. So it takes in inputs, and I'll call this input as vector x, okay, of n dimension. Okay, so x1, x2, x3, dot up to xn. Okay, and these are interconnected to the hidden layer. Interconnection. So, and finally, these are connected to an output. Okay, this is output, and this is your output. Output layer, and this is your hidden layer. Okay. Now, so what is that? There's a connection like this. Okay, going on, and now what theorem says is that one layer, number of neurons can be any much. Okay, you just need a one hidden layer. We need just a one hidden layer with sufficient neurons. Okay, so that you write any whatever be arbitrary function. You can just take any function. For example, you can take any function f of x, which is equal to y. Then any function of x can be approximated by a neural network. Function like this. Okay, I work with one sufficient number of hidden neurons to imitate or to approximate this continuous function, this any arbitrary function you can take. So that is called the that is called the universal approximation theorem. So a multi-layered network of neurons with a single hidden layer can be used any continuous at precision. Okay. Next is the revival of artificial neural networks. I'm just going to continue that. Then came after that. Again, you see that during this time, again there was no major after the invention of the gradient descent or the backpropagation algorithm. Still, the research was not picking up. Okay. But then came in 2000. Okay, so one was unsupervised pre-training. Okay, So people used to have a lot of problems in back propagation also. Okay. So I was talking about you have back propagation with multiple layers. You can have, but a single for approximate. But if you add more layers, then your neural networks becomes more non-linear in nature. Okay. But the problem was that there was a problem in back propagation learning, meaning that the back propagation learning is totally based on something called gradient descent. I told you. So gradient means you're going to talk about the derivative first of the function, activation function. So when I talk about first order derivative, then you should know that the functions, the neuron functions should be differentiable. If the neuron functions are not differentiable, then automatically learning will not happen. Okay. Or in any case, if the neuron gets saturated or the neuron becomes zero, okay, that is the gradient becomes saturated or the gradient becomes zero. Zero means what? The gradient slope is zero. Stops. Those days in training neural networks. Okay. So then came the technique of unsupervised pre-training by Hilton and his colleagues in 2006, wherein they try to overcome this exploding and vanishing gradient, the problem of exploding and vanishing gradient by using unsupervised pre-training. That enables multi-layer, okay, without 2007-9 again what happened was again there was more effective measures were there to to improve the efficiency of unsupervised pre-training. Then came the first application of neural networks by Graves et al., who used this neural network in handwritten recognition of Arabic language. They used the Arabic letters and they started applying this neural networks for handwritten character recognition in Arabic in 2009. Success in speech recognition over the HMM based. Know that before 2010, speech recognition systems were based only upon the statistical approaches. Okay, mostly all natural language processing, whether you take it machine translation or speech recognition. Okay, all these were based on statistical methods. But after 2010, with the advent of artificial neural networks and improved training algorithms, people started using neural networks for activities like recognition, natural language processing, machine translation, and also handwritten character recognition. Okay, then the advent of GPUs came. The advent of GPUs, graphical processing units, the computer architecture. Okay, so because training takes a lot of time. So, but what happened was with the help of the processors, we call GPUs. So we are now able to fast. The GPUs the kind what you call single instruction multiple data, SIMD type of architecture. So they were best suited. They were best suited for training neural networks. So nowadays you have servers that have GPU cards. So with the help of GPU cards, you are able to train a large amount of data. So now you say you have lot of data. Okay, and of course the MNIST data set which in 2000 hand character. So lot of data at the same time you have a lot of power in computing power. So because of this, so a lot of computing power, lot of data, and also efficient algorithms for training. Because of this, there was again a renewed interest in 6 to why that's people know all the corporates also started using neural networks. Say Google, you take it Google, you take it Amazon, you take it MATLAB, you take any corporate. Okay, they started using artificial intelligence in a larger scale because of these factors. These are the factors. Okay, right. Then people started creating pattern recognition. Pattern recognition means say visual computer vision type sort of applications, which actually surpassed even the human ability. Say if humans are very good at recognition, scene recognition and all, this of GPU and of course your improved algorithms, computers started beating humans. Okay, computer accuracy became better than human accuracy, almost equal to human accuracy. Okay, generally there is always some error, we call it as Bayes error. Okay, so even if a superhuman does a work, okay, even if a human does a task of say recognition, his error perform better than Bayes error. So Bayes error is always going to be there. This is the minimum error. This is the minimum error. So sometimes humans may perform human error will be almost equal to Bayes error. In that case, we say that particular expert is a very expert, but even an expert is tend to make a mistake. Especially if you talk about doctors, if they are they may also commit an error, and that error is called the Bayes error. It's a very small error. Okay, but nowadays what is happening is our computers, our computer vision systems are now Bayes error better than humans. Like this, you will have Bayes error at the bottom. This is Bayes error. Sometimes above that will be the human error. All machines will perform better than human error. All that computer automated systems will be here, but now computer systems are now performing better than human. So this is what a computer program will do. Okay, better than human, but not better than Bayes. Bayes is the minimum. You cannot get beyond that. Okay, so nowadays computers are now performing very well. Okay, as the application was traffic sign proposed in 2011 by Sersen. Okay, at all. Yeah, and then came ImageNet, visual recognition challenges. ImageNet data sets became available. So from 2012 to 2016, now you see that you have a lot of ImageNet has lot of data. Okay, in categories of data in the form of images. Okay, and which are available for research and vision programs, vision or computer deep learning networks on this image net. Okay, so because of this, there was again a revival of artificial neural networks from 2006 onwards. Till date it is there. Okay. Now, winning more visual recognition challenges, you know that people started building networks that were starting very complex. You see, in those days, it was first was your there was something called LeeNet. Actually, I'm not put here. There was a LeeNet which had some layers, but then AlexNet, then ZF, VGGNet. I mean, these are layers. Okay. Then you have the Google Net, you have the MS ResNet, Microsoft ResNet. So you see how many hidden layers they are having. Okay, so many, 152 hidden layers. So that's really big number of hidden layers, and because of this improvised training algorithms, like what I said, so unsupervised pre-training and all, people started were able to the neural network. Okay, and that is why, see, in 11, 7, 3.6% error. That means your error is reducing. Okay, that means this 3.6 is almost equal to the base error. Okay, so that means that computers are performing better than human beings. Okay, now we will have a small digression from the normal thing to, again we'll go back, okay, to this Hubble and Wiesel experiment. Okay, that was a breakthrough in medicine. Actually, again, Hubble and Wiesel Nobel Prize in medicine. They said scene how the neuron actually analyzes a scene. So generally, you know that whenever you look at a scene, so you see a lot of things. Okay, you see a lot of objects. Okay, you see a lot of natural or man-made objects. But assume that you are looking at a face. Assume that you are looking at a face. In the face, we are not going to process the entire face as it is. Okay. So what we are going to do is, there are some cells in the neurons, okay, and these cells, what are the orientations in certain direction. For example, if a cat is looking at a, say you see a slanting line, okay, so there are cells in the cat's brain that actually respond to the slanting line. Similarly, there are cells in the cat's brain that respond to horizontal lines. So there are cells in the cat's brain that respond to vertical lines. Okay. So we do not look at a scene completely as it is, but we break down the scene into simpler features. Okay. So any face or anything can be broken down into simpler features, and each simpler features is actually what we are trying to do. We are trying to analyze, and then we are trying to combine them to form complex features. Say edges, vertical lines, horizontal lines, and slanting lines, they are combined to give you complex features, like say a circle or say a rectangle, something like that. Okay, and then you rectangles, you form, okay, a hierarchy of, there's a hierarchy recognition task, the brain, and this was suggested by Hubble and Wiesel. By using a cat, they showed different orientations, lines in different orientations to the cat, and with the help of they inserted some electrical probes into the brain cells, and they found that certain neurons were responding to certain orientations of lines. Okay, so that was a breakthrough in neuroscience, and that was where Hubble and Wiesel were given the Nobel Prize. And so till today, we use the same example of a cat. Okay, whenever you talk about neural networks, we always try to recognize whether it's a cat or a dog. Okay, you see, the cats were used in human, in neuron. Okay. Then came now what you call nowadays called the convolutional neural networks. In those days, it was called the neocognitron. So you see that there's no this whether it is convolutional neural network or whether it is recurrent neural network, what we talk today, they are not actually there. Okay, called neocognitron. It was proposed by Fukushima et al. In 1980. So, using which they performed handwritten recognition. Okay, using backpropagation over a convolutional. So they performed some sort of handwritten. Then came in 1989, Li Kun et al. He performed this handwritten character recognition. Okay, then in 1998, this LeNet 5, okay, was used on MNST data set, and then they it is a handwritten number. So it was, you see the first neutron, okay, the oldest CNN, okay, convolutional neural networks. Then convolutional neural network came in 89. Then now in 98 it was called LeNet. But now you see that now you have a lot of optimization, better algorithms, say Nestor algorithm, ADAGAD, RMS prop, Adam, Eve, and beyond Adam. So these are the different optimization algorithms that we are using. Because of this optimization algorithms, we are able to do even better and better type of learning. And now you see that in an 8 better algorithm use convolutional neural networks with these algorithms. Okay, and we are performing very well. Next is about inferring from sequences. So far we have been talking only about a single input and single output. Okay, so that's what we have been talking about. But now what we are talking about is this. It is not a single short input, but it is going to be an input is going to be a sequence of inputs. Okay, so that we are going to involve time here. We are going to involve time. So our inputs will be presented at the same time, not at the same time, but it will be presented one after the other. Okay, there will be a temporal very attached. So next is yeah. So what is the difference between a sequence and thing? So here I say that each unit in the sequence interacts with the other units that follow. So meaning is talk about speech, music, and all. You see that are not important. Okay, say for example, if I'm talking about music or say speech or sentences, so you know that if this x1, x2 are the inputs at different points of time, so up to xn. So this is a sequence. I call this as a sequence. This present sequence. This is first in the sequence, second in the sequence, third in the sequence, nth word in the sequence. Something like that. It could be a music symbol, or it could be a sound phoneme, or it could be a word, a character, whatever it is. But if you do that, then you see that there is, if you input, this is not independent. This input has some contextual dependency on the previous one, and will also have some contextual dependency of the next input. Okay, so each input will depend upon the previous or the next input. Okay, sometimes close, sometimes even far also. Sometimes you may have a sentence which is very big, then you may have an input here, and that input may have a dependency on a word that is long coming after some long time. Okay, so I'll give an example for that also. So in that case, you will see that this long-term dependency that happens. Okay, and this short difference. Okay, all this. Okay. So how do you model sequences? Now that is our problem. Okay, so it's not like showing a single photograph and telling whether it is a cat or a dog. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play a length of music, and I'm going to say what type of music it is, whether it is classical music. Now the problem. Okay, and sequences is that the length of the sequence is not fixed. The length of the sequence is not fixed, and therefore what happens is a sequence may be as short as two symbols, or a sequence may be as long as 100 or even 150 symbols. Okay, so for example, if you take a sentence may be a short sentence, like 2 words, or you may have a sentence which is say even a complete paragraph. So the sequence is not bounded. Okay. Okay, and because of that, there is a lot of problem that happens in learning and all. But now what has happened is, because of this sequences and other things, so now we have better architecture that is called the RNN architecture, with special cells called LSTM, long short memory, long short term memory cells, and gated recurrent units, GRU and all. So these now are able to manage this long term dependencies and all those things. Okay, so now we have very good architectures are available, and because of that, now you see that we are in a very comfortable position modeling of. So again, you see that it's not new. RNN is was initially called half-wheel network. Okay, it was introduced in 1982 itself. It was called content addressable memory, and then in 1986 it was called Jordan network, and in 1990 it was called Elman network. So all are actually recurrent neural networks. Okay, why? What is the difference between an ordinary feed-forward network and a recurrent network? Is the feedback. Suppose if you don't have this feedback, if we don't have this feedback, if we don't have this feedback, then it is a feed-forward network. It's a feed-forward network. Okay, but if you have this feedback, there's output, again the output comes back to the input. Okay, and you see there's a feedback. It's called a recurrent. Okay, without a feedback, it is called a feed-forward network. Okay, with the feedback, it is called a recurrent network. So you see that here in this diagram you can see. So you have inputs, okay, and you see you have outputs, but the outputs are also taken back and they are fed into the inputs. The outputs are also fed into the feedback connection. Feedback connection is because we, okay, are not going to be input. We are going to present the inputs over a period of time, and the inputs that are coming in a sequence, they depend upon each other. Okay, there's dependency between the inputs. Okay, right. So, and what is the difference between a Jordan network? Jordan network, the output state of each time step is fed into the next time step, thereby allowing interaction between time steps of these things. So every time you give an output to the input, okay, it's called a Jordan network. But when you give a Elman network, the hidden state of each time step is fed to the next step. So even in the hidden layer also you do a, okay. So these half-wheel network or a Jordan network or Elman network, they are all recurrent networks. They are all recurrent networks. And today we use advanced recurrent networks, as I told you. We call, okay. Again, the problem was there because even though it was introduced in say 82, 86 and 90, the problem still happened, and that problem was the exploding gradient. As I told you, the exploding gradient problem, meaning that as you propagate, say you have so many hidden layers. If it is a recurrent network, you have so many time steps. So when you are doing a back propagation, you will gradients. Okay. As the error back, what gradients will become zero. The gradient, the delta delta W is a gradient. Okay. The gradient becomes zero. When the gradient becomes zero, what happens is there's no learning that is taking place. There's no learning that is taking place. So similarly, if the gradient saturates, again there's no learning. Okay. So if if I want to tell you a game, say for example, a function will be like this. Okay. So here it is. So okay. So assume something like that. This is half. Now, when you are here, there's no learning because there's a slope. You see, the slope is 0. The slope is 0, so there will not be learning. When you are here, the slope is almost 1. There's no learning. Only in this period, in this range, you have a slope, and learning can occur only in this range. Okay, that's the problem. And generally, if your neuron is either saturated or if it is shut down, then we call it exploding or vanishing gradient. And after that, the neural network will not learn. Even though you present whatever, how many number of data you present, the neural network will not learn. Okay, and because of that, you will the network will not. But there, people started using, as I told you, LSTM and so that could solve the complex long-time lags. And because of that, what happened was we are able to learn even bigger networks like this. So what happened was recurrent neural networks started beating humans in games itself. Like for example, Atari, Go, poker. So these are games. Actually, the Go is a game, poker is a game, Atari is a game. So different right computer programs that can run in a better manner, even play better than a human. Okay, because of this breakthroughs. Okay, now I will just talk about different applications of deep learning, and that is modern deep learning. You have, so we use modeling. Now, what is language modeling? Is a word. Okay, you might on mobile phone whenever you're typing, say hello, how. If you just type how, are you will automatically be suggested. Okay, so auto suggestions are there. Okay, so they are possible only because of language modeling. Speech recognition is converting speech to text, text dictation systems. Machine translation is converting from one language to other languages. All of you are using Google Translator and all. You are very well aware of that. Conversation modeling. This robots are doing this. Nowadays, whenever you call somebody over a phone, you will not be directly talking to the operator. You will be talking to a softbot who will be answering your questions. Okay, so that is conversation modeling. Question answering is same like the same one, but maybe more specialized. For example, in a BPO or something like that. So in a particular domain, you may be asking certain questions for which you will be answers will be given by the machine. Okay, so it's like the Turing test proposed in the olden days. Object recognition and detection. Nowadays, you can detect on a, say you want to count the number of pedestrian on a road or a number of people who are driving a two-wheeler. So we can detect and we can recognize. Visual tracking, image, video captioning. Now it is possible to look at a video, tell what is that. Okay, if people are there on a dining, so if you show the image, the neural network will say, oh, there are people who are having a discussion over the dining table. It will tell you what is their actual, it will caption the image or a video. Visual question answering, you show something and ask question, it will answer. Okay, so input is visual, output is a sequence. Video summarization, you show a video, it will tell you what is actually happening in that video. Now, not only this, now you sort of now you have adversarial using which I can generate faces, I can generate human beings, photographs who are never born. Okay, I can generate a computer generated image, and that computer generated image will be a human being who was never born. Okay, and similarly I can create computer generated music, and I need not always play a music like for example Ilayaraja or A.R. Rahman, but what I can do is I can create compose a music or generate a music on my computer. So all these things are possible because of this modern neural networks. Okay, so this is so now I'm not finished yet because I have time up to 11 o'clock. So what I have done so far is that I have just told you an history of neural networks, how it began in long back, and how what is the state of art today. Okay, so today I have come. What I will do is another slide. Okay, I'll go to my another slide. Is it okay? Anybody from the technical team? Hello.
Sir, sir, tell me, sir.
Is it okay?
Yes, sir, fine, sir.
Okay.
Are you
Okay.
going to share any other slides, sir? Or,
Yeah, I'm going to slide because I have some more time, no? So I will
yes, sir.
have another 10 to 15 minutes. I will have.
Okay, sir.
No. Yeah. So I'll come to this thing. So, so history and all we have seen. Yeah. So this again, I'll tell you what is a biological neuron looks like. So I told you that. So you have a neuron cell, okay, which is called the soma. Processing happens. Soma has a lot of dendrites, which are inputs to the soma, and each dendrite is connected to the output of another cell, and this long arm of a cell is called the axon. Axon is the output of a neuron, okay, and this the output of the neuron axon bifurcates, and actually what happens is it actually connects to the dendrites with a synapse. There's a synapse here. So I was talking about those things in the previous slide. Okay, and the act of visual perception, I told you, is a hierarchy. Okay, so that means whenever you see something, it falls on your retina. So retina is not supposed to be a input device. Okay, your eyes are not supposed to be input device. Our eyes are supposed to be some information processing unit, an extension of the brain. So eyes are to be considered as the extension of the brain. Okay, so where emitting cells are recognized, different what you call layers. Okay, a hierarchy. So you have the LGN, and you have the V1, V2, V4. So these are called the different layers of the visual cortex. So humans have a visual cortex that is situated in the back of the head. Okay, so which is specializing in vision, analyzing a scene or vision. So the visual cortex is there. So it is the processing happens at the visual cortex in a hierarchy. It happens in a hierarchy, and then finally the decisions are taken by a prefrontal cortex and other areas of the brain, where decisions are taken and appropriate motor cells are. Say somebody throws a ball at you, visual systems will do the task of recognition of the detection of the ball, tracking of the ball, and finally this decision making motor control, they will do the coordinate your hands such a way that you catch the ball. Okay, so it's a very complex system. It's a very complex system that actually happens very in a we don't feel that complexity at all. But if you had to do this for a robot or some other things, so it will require a lot of I told you the story of the cat. It is not simple. You see that the vertical edges, put them together to make the nose, mouth, eyes. Then what you will do? You will put those nose, mouth, and eyes together to form the face. So face is not detected as it is. Face is detected in a step-by-step manner. So you see there exists a hierarchy. There exists a hierarchy. Okay. So McCulloch-Pitts, I told you. So this is I told you both. Say for example, that is the threshold parameter. So inputs is equal to some function of g of x, where g of x is just the sum of these inputs. Just take the sum of these inputs, and the inputs are binary. And just take the sum of the inputs, and if you have to, if this g of x happens to be, the sum happens to be greater than some threshold, then output is 1. If the g of x happens to be less than threshold, the output is 0. That's all, very simple. So I'll just give an example here. So you can simulate your AND gates, OR gates using our McCulloch-Pitts. Okay. So for example, here you see that inputs x1, x2. Now, okay. So this is a unit. Now this is an AND function. So an AND function, tell me what is the AND function? All x1, x2, x3 should be 1. All x1, x2, x3 should be 1. Then only the output should be 1. If any one of them is 0, the output should be 0. Okay, so how will it then? What you will do? You will hand code the threshold as 3. You put the threshold as 3. You put the threshold as 3. Now you see that only when I put all the inputs 1, so then only when I add up all these things, I get 3. So 3 is equal to 3, so the output is 1. If it goes 0, the sum is will be 0. So this is, so what I'm trying to do is I'm just hard coding or hand coding the threshold. Okay. And similarly, if I want to do an OR function, if any one of the input is 1, the output should be 1. So in that case, what I will do is I'll change the threshold to 1. Now, if any input is 1, output is 1, or any two input is 1, output is greater than 1, so it is 1. Okay. All three are 1, then it's also 1. But if all are 0, in that case, the sum is 0, therefore the threshold is 1, therefore the output will be 0. So the output will be 0 when all are 0, but if any one of the input is 1, the output will be 1. So by changing the threshold, I'm able to implement an AND function or an OR function using my McCulloch-Pitts. Okay. Now you take this example of another example. This is x1 and not x2. Okay. So here you see that you put a special symbol here, that is a bubble, which means that it's an inhibitor. It's an inhibitor. If any inhibitor is 1, if this is 1, then output is 0. That's all. Goes off. If the 0 is what? For example, if I want threshold is 1. If this is 1, what will happen? This becomes 0. Okay. So output will be 0. Okay. So if this is x1 and not x2, and x1 and not x2. So x2 should not be 1. If x2 is 1, then it depends upon x1. If x1 is 1, so this is threshold is 1, automatically work. Then it is, so the inhibitor, any one of the inhibitor is 1, output is 0. Okay. Similarly here you see a NOR function. Okay, NOR function where both inputs are inhibitor. Okay. If both are 0, then what will happen? Output will be 1. Okay. Output will be 1 when both inputs are 0. But whereas if any input is 1, then it's an inhibitor, so output will be 0. Output will be 0. So it's a NOR function. It's a NOT function. NOT function is you are giving an inhibitor 0, then this inhibitor is 0, then the threshold is 0, therefore it becomes 1. So you see, if you give 1, it becomes 0. If you give 0, it becomes 1. So now you see that using McCulloch-Pitts, I can simulate any logic gates. Okay. using the hand threshold. I can do my job easy. Okay. So this is how a Macaulay-Pitts works. Okay, so you see that the R function, if you take the R function of say 3 variables, because I'm taking 3 variables, so I have a 3-dimensional structure like this. Cube I will have. Now you see that each corner is say when all are 0, it is in the origin. Okay, so these are the different. Each vertex of this cube is one set of inputs. Okay, right. So there will be a plane here, this shaded triangle, that's a plane, that is your threshold, and that threshold is theta, which is equal to 1. Okay, so this is equal to 1, threshold is 1. So x1 plus x2 plus x3 equal to 1. That is our threshold. So if your inputs happen to be greater than 1, so any input that is beyond, above this triangle will be 1. Anything that goes below that triangle will be 0. Okay, right. So for 2 inputs you can assume like this. Okay, so for 2 inputs x1 plus x2 equal to 1, and that is this line. If your inputs happen to be greater than 1, greater than or equal to 1, then my output is 1. If my input is less than, your input cannot be here. My valid inputs are only this. These are my valid inputs. I cannot have an input somewhere here. No inputs here because I'm dealing variables. I'm dealing because as far as input and outputs are binary. So my only the vertex are the inputs. Okay. So similarly here also only the vertex are the inputs. Okay. Right. More examples you can take. So this is an example of AND. Okay, in that case you see your that line comes here. So x1 plus x2 equal to 2 because I'm using 2. So if this output should be 1 means this should be 1 and this should be 1. Then only this will add up to 2 and the threshold is 2, so output is 1. If any one of them becomes 0, my sum will be 1, but my threshold is greater than my sum. So in that case output will be 0. Okay, so like that. I told you has a weighted in addition to take any real value. The input need not be a binary value, it can take any real value. Okay, right. And in that case, you see that now you have a weighted sum which is greater than 0, y is 1, and some weighted sum is less than 0, y is 0. And what is this 0? Okay, the 0 is actually we are taking as a thing, but what we will do is we will take one special network, that is we will have say instead of saying inputs x1 x2 up to xn, we will have one more input. We call that input x0 and w0. Okay, where x0 is always 1, okay, and w0 is your threshold, w0 is your theta. And you see that that's the difference between Macaulay-Pitts and perceptron. In perceptron, Macaulay-Pitts, you see that theta is preset into the, but whereas theta is again of a we call it bias. Okay, and you can learn W0. That means the neuron or the perceptron can not only learn the weights, but they can also learn the threshold. That's the advantage. So that's what learning came into neural networks. Okay. Otherwise, Macaulay-Pitts will not learn. There's no learning algorithm for Macaulay-Pitts. Whereas for perceptron, there's a learning algorithm. Okay. So this is the learning algorithm. Okay. So I will not get into the details of it. So this is your input. So I told you this is x0 and this is w0, and x0 is always 1, and these are the inputs. Okay. So you get a weighted output, and these are the weights. Okay, and all the weights are parameters that you can learn. So this W0 is your theta, the threshold. Others are your input weights. Okay, right. So you can have this algorithm. So you see that now for every positive point and negative point, for every positive point, your weights are the added. For every negative point, your weights are subtracted. Okay, so there is no gradient here. Here there's no sort of a gradient. Okay, it is actually a step operation. Okay, so I'll show you with the diagram. So just you need not. So here you see that as in case of MP, that is McLaughlin, I had only input here. Okay, but now you see you can give any input. So your inputs can be in this range or it can be in this range also. Okay, for perceptron, because perceptron means it is taking real inputs. Okay, so this line can be anywhere. Okay, right. So that's what perceptron is. So now, but there is a problem with always with XOR problem. We always talk about in XOR in perceptron that it is not linearly separable. Whereas you see that if you have an AND function, so AND function, the output for 0 0 is 0, but whereas this is also 0, this is also 0, this is 1. This is for AND function. But you see AND function, you can see you have a linearly separable. I can have a decision boundary like this. All zeros are coming this side and all ones are going that side. So I will say the AND function is linearly separable. Okay. Similarly, OR is linearly separable. Okay. So all functions are linearly separable. There are some functions which are not linearly separable. Like for example, the XOR. So here you see that I have here the output is XOR is 0. Here also the output of XOR is 0. Here the output of XOR is 1. Here the output of XOR is 1. Now you see that how do you now have a decision boundary, or how is it linearly separable? Now you see you cannot separate with a single decision boundary. Okay. So what you do is you have to put two decision boundaries like this. Okay. So something which is between these two decision boundary is 1. Other than outside this decision boundary is 0. So therefore, because of these two lines, you do decision boundary, you need another hidden layer. So that's the necessity of hidden layer in XOR circuit. Okay. So XOR, whenever I'm simulating an XOR problem with neural networks, I need a hidden layer. That's the reason people started using hidden layer. But I need only one hidden layer. Okay. So as per so if we take with the two variables x1 x1 x2, how many Boolean functions you can create with only just two inputs? How many Boolean functions can you create? The answer is 16 Boolean functions are there. Okay. So what are the 16 Boolean functions? So this is all zeros for whatever be the input, output is all 0. Similarly, whatever be the input, output is all 1. So this is one Boolean function. Okay. Similarly, so what is this Boolean function? This is AND. On this side, what is this Boolean function? F15. It's a OR. No, sorry, not on OR. So this is 0 1 1 will be, this is OR. F8 is OR. Okay. F8 is OR. I'll just use it. This is my OR function. What is this? This is my where is my AND? Yeah. What is F2? F2 is AND. All functions you will see here. Okay. 0 1 0 is there. Yeah. What is F7? F7 is XOR. 1 0 0 1. This is XNOR. What is NOR? NOR is, this is NOR. Okay, right. So like this. So it goes on like that. No, so no, it's not NOR, I think. Sorry, it is NAND. Sorry. This is not NOR. This is NAND. NAND gate. Okay. So it is, when both are 1, it is 0. What is NOR? NOR is 1 0 0. NOR is 1 1 0. All ones 0. Okay. 0 1 1. All the ones. Okay. Okay. I think this one. Okay. Right. So whatever it is, so totally these are the different types of combinations you can have for two inputs. I have 2 power 2 power n. So 2 power is n is 2 inputs. So 2 power 2 power 2. 2 power 2 is 4. 2 power 4 is this 2 is 4. So 2 power 4 is 16. Therefore, I will have 16 functions. Okay, and among them, how many are linearly separable? Okay, all are linearly separable except XOR function. XOR function is this one. Okay, and not XOR function, F10. This one. Except these two functions, all other functions are linearly separable. Okay. And this is about the sigmoid neuron. I told you. In case of perceptron, this was the perceptron. Okay, the perceptron had a step output, but whereas people started introducing more activation function like this, so it's called a sigma neuron. So the activation function is smooth and differentiable. Because the output function is smooth and differentiable, what happened was this is how a step the perceptron learning happens. It happens in a step-by-step manner. But whereas if you take sigma neuron, the error surface becomes very smooth and your learning becomes very easy. Okay, so that here you can apply gradient descent. But here you cannot apply gradient descent. This is perceptron learning algorithm. This is gradient. Because of this sigmoid neuron and gradient descent approach, the back propagation came into picture. And because of that, people started, there was a huge success of neural networks. Okay. Right. So like this. So this is the basic gradient descent algorithm. So which uses your delta W, delta BI, which is your parameters, the gradients of the parameters for updating the weights and biases. These weights and biases are updated by gradients. Okay, so this is the advantage of gradient descent algorithm. And because of that, say you may initially start here, but you see that as the learning proceeds, the learning goes in the direction of the steepest gradient and finally comes and settles here. At this point, you see the error surface is blue. When the error surface is blue, I mean the error is less. When the error surface is red, that means error is more. So now you see that the algorithm, wherever you start, you may start anywhere, it will always come down to a position where the error is low. Okay, so that is the advantage of gradient descent algorithm, and that because of that, the problem with perceptron was the perceptron could not use gradient descent. It had its own learning algorithm, but it was better than McCulloch-Pitts. McCulloch-Pitts didn't have the learning ability at all, but whereas perceptron had the perceptron learning algorithm, but gradient descent even still proved it much further. Okay, so that was it. So you see, you have any arbitrary function. Okay, I can approximate that arbitrary function using histograms like this, and each histogram is actually output of a neuron. Okay, the more number of hidden neurons I use, I'll be getting better and better approximation of that function. Is or no? If I use less number of neurons, then the approximation is not so good. But if I use more and more number of neurons, then my approximation of that arbitrary function is more and more accurate, and I'm able to do that. So that's the reason. These are two important theorems I told you. This theorem we already learned. Okay, universal approximation theorem that says a multi-layered network of neurons with single hidden layer can be used to approximate any continuous function to any desired precision. This we already seen. This is another function. Any Boolean function with n inputs can be represented exactly. You see that this is a continuous function you can do only for desired precision. But if it is a Boolean function, I can do it exactly. I can do it exactly by a network perceptron containing one hidden layer with 2 power n perceptrons. You need 2 power n perceptrons, and with that I can exactly approximate any Boolean function. But for any other arbitrary function, I can do it to only a desired precision. Okay, right. That's all. So with this, I will close my talk. So if there is any queries, you may raise. Okay. So today my agenda was only to introduce you to the concept of neural networks. Maybe I think you will have more sessions. I think on deep learning and other things. Maybe that's why I stop with this. Okay. So to summarize, I will say that I started with the history of neural networks. Then I came into what is different types of networks that have been created, like for example, starting from Mcculloch-Pitts, perceptron, multi-layer perceptron, recurrent neural networks, and I given the history of every architecture that you have today. Okay, right.
Participants, if you are having any query, please ask our resource person, or otherwise put in chat box. Sir, 25th attendance is not posted due to some technical problem in Atal portal. So we will update it soon. Regarding our this current session, suppose if you are having any query, please ask us or put in the chat box, or otherwise let us conclude.
Okay, I think there are no
Okay, sir.
queries.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so thank you, thank the participant for the patient hearing, and also thank the Vellalar College for Engineering and Technology for having given me this opportunity to interact with the faculty. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. I want to express on behalf of our Atal team, ECET, we express our heartfelt thanks to you, sir. It is our
Okay.
honor to have a wonderful resource person like you. Thank you, sir. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Participants, join the same link for our next session. It will start at 11:30 a.m.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes?
Ma'am, kindly please repost the today's attendance link once more.
Okay, Pa. Wait on this meeting itself, okay?
Okay, thank you, ma'am.